So we saw, for those of you who are just coming on, I'll do a quick recap. First of all, let me give you scheduling, since this is the end of the week. Obviously, this is the last year. And of this week, next week we'll have a full week of shiurim. Starting on Sunday, the Rav will speak on in Yonei Tshuva, and we'll do a chana for that on Sunday and Monday. On Tuesday, we'll go back to the Unam of Kippur with Ashir and Nilas Sandal from Zev Smith. Chazara. On Wednesday, Rabbi Kalas will speak on operating in Yonei Tshuva, but then hopefully we'll have enough of them on Mekaymis to understand what he's talking about. And on Thursday, Garan Ritzach Saratskin will talk about Tshuvas Yom Kippur. That's next week. The week after, which is the week of Rosh Hashanah, on Sunday and Monday, we'll have expanded programs. Sunday is Sunday, Monday is Rosh Hashanah, Vazei does Labor Day. We both have Labor Day, because we have a lot of stuff we have to do that day for obvious reasons. So we'll have expanded shiurim on Sunday and Monday, L'Regel, Erev Yom Rosh Hashanah, and Tzad Gedalia, and the week days from Kippur we'll have shiurim in Yonah the Yama and Hilchos Tshuva from Gedalia Yisrael. Ad Kan, in preparation, and we'll announce the exact schedule next week. Okay, everybody say. So in the previous shiur, for those who just came on, we went through the Seidos of Hilchos Mechila. Chazal learned this from various psukim, both in the Gemara and Yuma, and then in the Sugya in Baba Kama, which is focused on the altercation between Avimelech and Avraham Avinu. It wasn't much of an altercation. It was about outright hate by Avimelech, and the Baruch Hu instructs Avimelech how to do tshuva, how to rectify what he had done. What we took out of these Gemaras is three things. Number one, every hate between Adam and Chaverei is also a hate between Adam and Makai, and therefore there is no such a thing as getting a kapara until you do what Chazal say is inherent in the process. Number two, the methodologies for this are learned from various psukim. Psukim we saw in the Gemaras in Yuma, from Mishlei, the psukim we saw in the Gemara in Baba Kama from Avimelech, and we came out with 4 or 5 operating halachas which find their way all the way ultimately into Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Siman Taf Reish Vav, where the halachas of Ritzias as Chaverei are encoded. And we see that the common denominator between these halachas is that the onus is not on the nifka, the onus is on the onus chiyuv, it's on the pegeah. He has to do a pretty wide-ranging set of actions, and at some point, the Torah said enough, and then the chiyuv switches to the nifka, and is clear to be meichel. Now let's try to understand using the dimyon that we saw in the Rekanati, where the Rekanati made a statement. The Bavli contains the halachas that it does. The Bavli has more stories than it has halachas. It had 5 or 6 stories. It only had 3 or 4 halachas. In the Bavli, we saw the halacha of Shurais. We saw the halacha of basic halacha, to be Meichelim, and not more than 3 times, but that's really it. Nilmad from the various psukim, including the pasuk of Yosef and the Shvatim. Yerushalmi adds more addicted to this. We'll see the Lashonis the Rishalmi is brought the Rishonim. One of the things the Rishalmi does is there's two halachas here, one based on the Gemara earlier in Yuma, where the Gemara talks about the Aknata of a Talmud Chacham. And the Gemara says that's a separate category. And we've dealt back in the Achana Shir that even though there is a requirement that there be a Bekashas Mechila, there is such a concept of a, let's call it an off-site Mechila. You Mechil the person without him coming to ask. You would think that this is the best possible way to do it. Why should I bother the guy? Did a terrible thing for me. The Pagaya did a terrible thing, didn't show up. The Nifka says, you know what? I'm looking for schussim for your Kippur Benecham Meichel. The Chiddush is that's not the best way to do it. Why? Because if you're looking out for the other person's neshama, as Rav was, you want to create a template, a structure which maximizes the mechila process for the pagaya to cleanse his account. So even though you could do that, it's mashma that is only a b'di'evet. It's a b'di'evet both on the side of the pagaya who should have shown up in person, or should have asked mechila, and the nifka who should figure out a way, if possible, to have the pagaya ask, Adonai Kach, you show up in his house, there from Kippur said, here I am, ask me mechila. Why? Because mevuyer that this is the bakashas mechila, the pagaya is a integral part of the kapara process, or the tshuva process, the Adon L'Chavei, right? And without it, you don't get a full kapara. A Talmud Chacham, says the Gemara, has a different halacha. Since the bizui of a Talmud Chacham is clearly a bizui of a Kodesh Baruch Hu too, that's the chaymer of the chait. A bizui of a person, a regular person, yes, it's true there is a chait of Adon L'Chavei, right? But it doesn't rise to the level of Chil Hashem. A bizui of a Talmud Chacham is inherent in that is a Chil Hashem. And therefore, Chil Hashem is a limited comparison. Chil Hashem require an entire share on the kapara and Chil Hashem is outlined in the Rambam or Ben Yaina. So for us, suffice for the moment that it's a much higher bar. So the Bezayin of Talmud Chacham was a much higher bar. What we took out of the Mefarshim is that the Bezayin of a Talmud Chacham does not allow a kapara unless there's a Bakashas Mechila. Since Bakashas Mechila upgrades the process on the part of the Payigeya, even if you're going to wash it away by being Michael him without the request, it's not as good. And the shaila is, why is it not as good? What's the difference? At the end of the day, he got the Pagiyah. And the shaila is, why is there such a nafkamina l'gai b'tal machach? As was asked in Echana Shir, why wasn't Rav just Michael him without having to create this entire story of going to his house? Those of you who weren't around earlier, Rav went to the house of the butcher to get him to ask Mechila. It didn't work out too well for the butcher. Teretzes, and then we ended with a interesting Rekanati. Rekanati introduces an Avera, one of the Averas of El Chaveri. That Avera is the Avera of Maitzi Shemra. Maitzi Shemra is terrible Avera, but it's generally included in the Dibur, Isurei Diburi al Lashain, such as Lashon Hara, Rechilas, Maitzi Shemra. It's not viewed kipshutai as different in kind. Maybe it's different in degree. Maitzi Shemra is worse than Stam Rechilas. Maybe it's worse than Stam Lashon Hara. Maitzi Shemra is worse because it has sheker attached to it. Lashon Hara could be emes, whatever the underlying power of the chait of Maitzi Shemra. For some reason, it is included as different in, as I mentioned, different in kind. And therefore, the shaila is, what do you do in such a case? So the Rekanati says, just like there's no chiyuv to be Michael a Rebbe, a busy with Talmid Chacham, the Rebbe has no chiyuv to be meichel under limited circumstances. Clearly not if there's no bakashas mechila. So too, Moiti Shemra, there's no chiyuv mechila. No chiyuv mechila. This is based on Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi is brought in the Mordechai, which if we can switch to the supplementary Marmakaimis, I'd like to show the element side. Then I'm going to raise a shaila, a real life shaila that I was able to see unfold under the auspices of Rav Steinman. We don't get the whole, we can't get the page in one shot. Are you doing this on purpose? Let's start here with the Mordechai in the bottom right. Okay. Minig levakesh mechila erev Yom Kippur. Some of the words are cut off in the end, so I'll read it from my text, so we'll get everything. Yimer Shuv Yisrael Baruch Shemayim Yisbarach Zichroi Shuv Mechaver Yisrael. Because Baruch Hu loves us. Tikkun Lem Yud Yimei Tshuva. He gave us a series of Yimei Tshuva. Shafila Yachid Ha'Osim Tshuva Behem Mekabel Tshuva Sai. It's Tshuva Tzibur. Gemara in Rosh Hashanah makes a chilek between Kam B'Yachid and Kam B'Tzibur, and the time. Okay, time when this overlaps is the better print. The time when this overlaps is on the series of Tshuva. Tshuva, the series of Tshuva has the power of Tshuva Tzibur. How that works? Okay, the answer Kipshuta is that the Koyach HaTzibur, let's get the right word, the Koyach HaTzibur, the Tshuva, gets the attention, Kaviyachal, of the Rabbeinu Shalom. Therefore, the Rabbeinu Shalom is mityaches to the Koyach HaTzibur. And therefore, all year around, the problem is Kaviyachal getting the attention of the Rabbeinu Shalom. Doing a Veira, he's not interested in you. There's a mechitza, Lashon Rambam, and Hilchos Tshuva, there's a mesech between you and the Rabbeinu Shalom. So there's no one around. When a tzibur shows up, it's a different story. If Gottesman shows up, because Baruch Hu not too interested during the year. If I show up as a koyach of tzibur, 1,000 people show up, 100,000 people show up, then it's a different story, and Kodesh Baruch Hu listens. Seris made tshuva, Kodesh Baruch Hu listens even to the yachid. Why? Because, as we know, in the Seris made tshuva, Kodesh Baruch Hu is yoyreid from his Kisya Kaveh to the Eilam HaTachtayim, Kaviyachol, and he's here, as you all know, the famous vart that we have heard since we were children. And in all year round, it's a long distance call. In Seris made tshuva, it's a local call. Right? Those of us of this year of a certain age, we know the difference between long distance and local. The kids don't know what that means, but the concept is clear. Comes out, says the Mordechai, that Fichach is our last of the last shows, but initially Reo, Limchel, Zelazeh, Purim, Kabul, Chubasam, Chulasam, Nekad Baruch, Vishalom, Chuma. And then he quotes a Tanchuma, which we did not see in the rush. Hashem Pekad Asari, Lam Dina Rabbeinu, Tiakatatan al Chaver, Kates, Schapawai. Kach Shan Rabbi Seinu. Vishal Chaver, Makim, Kim Chapper. Makim, Edik Ram Chap. Atratz is Chaver. Oh, let's say, like Gimov, Mayase, Amra Besi Ben Dur, Maskit. Simonze, you must be Adcha, Kalayamim, Sha'ata, Merachem al Chavercha. If you are Merachem and you are Chaver, Yashcha Merachman, the people Merachem on you, Mencham Merachem Vercha, Emcham Merachem. Mayase. So now the Gemara, the Mordechai quotes the Lashon of Gemara with the 10 people, but modifies it a bit. In the Maran and the Ram, we saw Shalosh. Here, the Shmuel says that if at the end of the day, you're not successful after the 3 times of the Shalosh, now you got to bring 10. Why 10? Bring 10. Because everybody listen to this phrase here. Before we get to this phrase, we now understand why you need 10 in such a case. because you did your hishtadlus on the Bein al-Chavera part. But as we explained, and all the achrayim, that every chet Bein al-Makayim al-Chavera has two parts to it. Bein al-Makayim al-Chavera, right? So you, by asking 3 times, Al-Pi Chazal, Al-Pi Pasuk and Yosef, did your hishtadlus, and you wiped away the Bein al-Chavera, Arechen Sheyodecha Magas. So now, what about the Bein al-Makayim? So that you have to tell the Rebbeinu Shalom, who makes a condition precedent to his mechila, that you ask mechila of the other person. So you bring 10 people. 10 people creates an Edom. It's Varsha B'Kedusha, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu shows up when there's 10 Jews trying to do a mitzvah, he shows up. So here he is, and you tell the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I did what I can. And now comes a very interesting phrase. Mordechai says, "Kadosh Baruch Hu roya shehishpol atzmai u'meracham." Shenema, he brings a pasuk we saw in the Gemara. Yeshua al nashim v'yem chatasi max basrei panim b'nafshim avor b'shachas. Okay, adkan. So the phrase that we need to take out of this is Kadosh Baruch Hu roya shehishpol atzmai u'meracham. The chiyuv of bakashas ritzui is a din hashpala. Where do we get this from? We get this from, as we mentioned in the Achana Shir, Kadosh Baruch Hu could have been Masadar a pius, an international peace conference between Avraham Avinu and Avimelech. But he didn't do it that way. He told Avimelech, go be Mephayisim. And Avimelech protested, I'm the king. It's a busha for me. Because Baruch said, it's required to be a busha for you. Why? Because if you think about it, Chet Bein al-Chavera is you're being pagea in the person's neshama. So in order, it is covered, in order to be metaken that mida keneged mida, says the Mordechai, based on this Tanchuma, you have to be mashpul yourself. Why? Because you are mizgoah b'kloin chavera, by being mavazehem, you pushed him down, and you up. That's how you're saying this guy is a bum and I'm a klash of a person. But you were wrong. You did an avera. In order to attack that mida connect mida, in order to fix the pagam in the firmament, you're mechuyev to be mashpul yourself, and that's the mida connected mida. And if you're a king, you're still mechuyev to do that. Because Baruch Hu roya shehishpol atzmai. Keep this phrase in front of your eyes. Let's finish this. Mordechai Yerushalmi says, Taniyah misuk yom tshuva. What does that mean? Yom misuk yom tshuva. Ris is mechaper. Okay? Is Ris mechaper with tshuva or not tshuva? What Shmuel trying to say? Not clear. The Yerushalmi then concludes with the following issue. Mandachat l'chaver tzarech l'memerlei sarech tzarlach. You mechuyev to go say to the person, I did a bad thing for you. Meaning, if you're chayt to keneg chaver, but he doesn't know about it. Do you know the paiskim? Should you go and tell him? And the halacha is, you're mechuyev to tell him, you're mechuyev to mevakesh mechila, make her din mechuyev mefarech a chet. Chav Chaim has a whole diyun. If by being mefarech a chet, you're going to make the person feel worse. Either he doesn't know the exact parameters of your chet, now he finds out, it's going to make you feel worse. So that's already a diyun. Shal Slanter and the Chav Chaim, how to handle that. But otherwise, you're mechuyev to tell him. And then, for some strange reason, Yerushalmi comes back to this specific case. Umasagada, Atamar Bashar Kolaveris. Avala Baiti Shemra Al Chavera Einle Mechila Ilam. Baiti Shemra Al Chavera Ein Mechila. So we talked about this a bit last year, but we didn't go into the Oimek Advarim because it was, I think, in a fill-in on a Chanish year. So I'd like to focus here a little bit and raise the obvious question of what is this issue here of Moitzi Shemra and why is it Cholok? I was desired to this several years ago, and then I saw it even in print. As you know, sometimes in the Sichsuchim, both in Eretz Yisrael and America, unfortunately, because of the ways Sichsuchim work out, there's often a Moitzi Shemra involved. I watched this unfold in the case of real-on case of a Chashav Talmid Chacham, and then I found a parallel story. Chashav Talmid Chacham have to protect anonymity, but he was the victim of a Hatzah Shemra. I know this for a fact. And second case, I can tell you the name of the person because he printed it in the Sefer. Rav Hillel Kupperman, the son of Rabbi Kupperman, the male of the Meshech Chochma, and I think of the Tzivul Torah, Chashav Talmid Chacham, and he ran a gemach in Yerushalayim. The guy borrowed a lot of money from the gemach, and decided he was going to repay, and his methodology of justifying the repayment, the non-repayment, was being paid to Shemra and the person who lent him the money. That's a time-honored tradition, unfortunately, in Klal Yisrael. So it was a very ugly situation. Here was a person who was running one of the biggest gemachim in Israel, which is a huge chesed for hundreds of people, and mit dem beschmutzt. Not such a kasha, they beschmutzt Moshe Rabbeinu, and exactly the same thing. Took some money, wasn't honest, whatever this beschmutzing was all about. So he came to a statement and he asked him, "Am I mechuyev to Michael?" In the case that I witnessed, same thing. Came to a statement and asked, "Am I mechuyev to Michael?" After a clear Mitzvah Shemra. So statement said, "You have to be a Michael." So in both cases, the protest was made from an Af and a Ramah. Ramah and Tafresh Vav, which we have in front of us. Back to the other one if you want, or however you want to get to Ramah and Tafresh Vav, I'm not sure. Okay, we can do it here. Mishnah Faresh has new. Feel like Nita El Betvar, which is the Gemara, Tarech Lefaise. The main of Misvais Berishayna B'Shleish Pamem ain't a Zakul Klai. Sorry, a main of Misvais Berishayna actually about Shlishes. Chom Makayim Yikom B'Shleish Hanash. You take 3 people with him. That's the Marcha we just saw. Rabbi, no limit. Then the Ramah adds the other side of the equation, based on the Maril, which we have printed here previously, but we don't have time to see inside. The Maril says, the Gemara says clearly, now the Ramah brings the strange exception. Okay, this is already a very dicey thing because you have to be a gadol. Adam gadol admoy to say I'm not being Michael because I mean it for his good. Since you, by definition, the game of davar, since you were the nifka, so who are you to make this determination? So Chavetz Chaim here doesn't go into it in detail, but he does say in nice test, this is a side issue. Let's go start with Ches. Okay. You want to teach the guy a lesson, so I'm not meichel you. Keep on doing this. I'm not meichel you. Nira de Melibai Sarach Lahasar Asinamen. Even Naniach, you have the right to start teaching them lessons, but you can't do it as an Negevadavar. So the way to remove the Negias is to take this cinnamon Mimiliba. This is a hard thing to do. Chavetz Chaim is Marach in this more in Hilchos, Sefer Chavetz Chaim, but we can take something out of this here too. What we can take out of this is that the mechila process can be a vegestelt, the toivas, Hamavakesh mechila. Not only do you need to set it up in a way which makes it better for him to get a full kapara by getting the right way to do it, it also has some lesser of tshuva involved. Because you're trying, if you're a person who can effectuate this, who's allowed to effectuate this, because Chavetz Chaim here, even Rishabura, even here where he doesn't go into it, Berichas is telling you that you have to remove any simon belivai, so you shouldn't be in a geva davar, otherwise you're just not being mechlam because you're an akzari. So the obvious reason for doing this is because because he did something bad to you. Okay, so but if you want to drag that you could remove the sinner, then you are effectuating a chelik of the tshuva process by helping him make sure he doesn't do it again. So we see that there is a duet between the pagay and nifka to fix up the pagay's actions. That you have a heter, if you're a barhachi, to help his tshuva and tell him not to do it again. Okay, next. Mechila. So what is mechila? Bar diyuma. Uadin mechama toiva atzmeishim yisyari sheagilai has a kashim. Chaim goes even further. Even if you're just if you're just afraid that the mechila will let the guy do it again, and therefore you'll have hezek again, therefore you're not mechila to your mechil. As I said, this is a subset here. We would really be in our right to go into this in detail, but it's a little bit out of the scope of today's year. Okay, now the Ramah tells us something very interesting. Ramah quotes this Mordechai. And the Tzionel Ramah, they give you a list of Rishonim who say this. The Mordechai, we saw it, the Smag, Gais Maimoni, the big overlap between the Mordechai and the Gais Maimoni, it's the most meaning of the Maram. Other Rishonim might take this. As we saw, this is not an invention of the Rishonim. This comes from the Yerushalmi. So, then the Ramaz might take it. We're back to where we started in our question. Why not? What's different about the chait of Haitzas Shemra that makes it different in kind and not just different in degree? So the Paiskim offer various truths to this. Mishabur here brings one of them. There's three truths offered the Paiskim. Mishabur decides to only bring one. Why? He says it's a Matthias Kasha. Because if you're going to be Michael, a person's Mighty Shamra, by definition, Mighty Shamra is something which is perpetrated out into the Avir Ha'olam, and therefore there'll be Ika de Shama Machashada, V'lei Shama Bepius, the Nishra Shemra. It's an operating problem. The Tzai Shemra is going to stay. Why? Because nobody will know about the Bakashas Mechila, so what does it help? If you will pagaya a person privately or even semi-privately. So there's still a halacha bakashas mechila barabim. We didn't go into this Gemara. The Gemara Namad Aleph, the next Namad Aleph asks Stira, Ashrei Kisui Chata, Him Sosi Mechasa Chet, and the Stira to the pasuk which says Him Mechila to be Mefarsa the Chet. The Gemara says Kam Be'an L'Chaver Be'an L'Makam. Be'an L'Chaver Be'an L'Makam. Privately, you say you video to a Kadosh Baruch Hu quietly. To be Mevais and Barabim certainly if the Chet was Barabim. So here the problem is the Chet was Barabim, and you won't have the ability to make sure everybody hears it. Fine. This is only one reason. The Rishonim the Paiskim bring two other reasons for this. The site of this Diki and the Shama is brought in the Trum Sadeshem, and there into the Magen Avram, here into the Mishabura. Mishabura generally would be Maitik and Magen Avram if it speaks to it, even if there are other things there. Okay, according to this time, L'chayra is Tzarech Bir. Many of various Banon Chaverai, where the Aval is Nishal Ayla, person was Pagay and another person, and it's forever. If somebody, Rahman son, killed somebody, he made his children Yisayim. He can't bring his father back. So what's worse about Mitzvah Shamra? Levush is Maitik this from Sadeshem, which is the Makar for this halacha, and he explains that as long as the Shemara is still out there in the world, people will remember it, and therefore the dam is nishpach anew every day. Pagay the Nifka. Pagay was Mighty Shemra on Aleph L'Sefer L'Seder Kisava. never did anything to rectify it. And it's very difficult to rectify it. Because once it's out in Avir Olam, and it is Manenu with the internet, it creates an absolute impossibility to rectify it. Chazal, it was a smaller chug, but as communication technology expanded exponentially, wider, you're caught in a wider net, so it's come out impossible to. So the Levush gives a very sad lumdus. It is like you're being Ratzechem every single day. And how could it be Meichelim? And the next day somebody else will come and will remember the Mitzvah Shemra. And then we'll have to start the process all over again. And therefore, the dam is nishpach every single day. Okay. We'll go. There's some lumps here which I don't have time to go into, so I'm going to hold it for Shlomo. So l'chayra, what the Trump Sedeshin and the Bush are trying to explain is the difference in kind of Mighty Shemra. Mighty Shemra is Taka Aveira, because somebody who's Pageya, and other Aveira, somebody who's Pageya, the Tsar is not Mischadish B'chol Yoim. Mighty Shemra is Mischadish B'chol Yoim, so you have a recurring thing, you're in a loop which you can never get out of. So the pshat is the aval is so great, therefore, a person is not mechuyev to be meichel, because from a practical issue, you're not being evros or yisharmo and netzach. The aver is happening every day, again, or not. Maybe even a mighty shemra, you're mechuyev to be meichel, mitam midas chasidus. The fact that it's being mischadish b'chol yom. And therefore, how could you have a mechila on the tsar, the new tsar, which is happening every day? So, okay, that's a good kasha. And therefore, the Trump Sedeshin says that's why there's no mechila lumps. Comes along the Marshal. I'll tell you the other two reasons in a moment. Comes along the Marshal, and the Marshal is the Mekar for the halacha, which is brought here in the Aleph. I don't have the Shartzin here because in that room, the Shartzin sends it to the Achrayim, the HaRav. The HaRav is Mekayrev in Yam Shlomo Kama. Yam Shlomo says that there's a midas chasidus to be meichel even on Mighty Shemra. How does that work? According to Trump Sedeshin, that's because the Pegia happens every day, and therefore the Ikad Deshama on the Pius and not on the private Pius, but not on, or Ikad Deshama on the Shemra, not on the Pius, and it's Ritzich every day. How does it work? Why are you Michael? Teretz is you can have a midas chasidus to be Michael prospectively on the matter of many times it kills you. The other two timing brought in the Achrayim, the Bach says that it's a hezek l'dairis. We don't have it here. I'm reading the ice, but it's a hezek l'dairis, and therefore it doesn't help if you're Michael, because all dairis, future dairis, need to be Michael. And if the future dairis cannot be Michael, your mechila cannot speak for them. Therefore, Shemra is different. The third time is brought in the Baal Seidel Mishnah, the Chasham Mefarshim from the Rambam. Maybe, okay. This Baal Seidel Mishnah says, even if you're Lakish Mechila, not everybody's going to believe it. They're all going to believe that really the Yitzhak Shemra is right. And it's emes. Why is he asking Mechila now? Another reason. And therefore, you can't be Metakein Chet. Chet which can never be Metukin. Okay? And therefore, there's no Chiv Mechila on Mitzvah Shemra, and Mekayre, as we said, is in the Yerushalmi, but there's a midas and novice chasidus that it's royal to be Michael. So in both of the cases that I mentioned, one of the cases of Rabbi Kupperman, where he was an innocent victim of a vicious Yitzhak Shemra, and the second case that I observed, where a Talmid Chacham was a victim of a Tzar Shemra, and he was blameless. There were all sorts of different nitunim in both cases. One of the shilas that came up was the second case, the person, the Mighty Shemra, didn't want to ask Mechila. And the shilah came up in the regular bit of the Chaverais. So he said there's a midas chasidus to be Michael, even though it's a erzatz Mechila, but there's a midas chasidus to be Michael, even if the person didn't ask you. Is there such a requirement, a liba, the marshal, which is this Mishnah Brura, that there's a midas chasidus? Okay, we'll hear that later. There's a midas chasidus to be Michael, even a mighty Shamra, without a bakasha of Mechila. So this shal came to Rav Shtema. Shal number one, Rebbe, are we mechuyev to be Michael? It's a mighty Shamra. Shtema said, yes, you should be Michael. So they came along armed with the Mishnah Brura, the state in Ramah, with our Ramah, there's no chiyuv Mechila, mighty Shamra. So Shtema answered, I wasn't there in the first round with the Rabbi Kupperman, but I was around to hear the second one, and Rav Shtema answered pretty much the same language in both. He said, good, you're right. This is Ramah. He said, let's get the language exact. What will you have if you're not Michael? Abisal Nakama? You'll have a little bit of Nakama? So that's what not being Michael is. Unless you're such a high madrega, as in the Mishnah Brura there, that you're, as in the Ramah there, you're teaching the person. Right? Most of us are not in this opportunity in madrega. Though we can say we're nucky from anything is. So Vos is Ta'abim as Mishnah Michael Zayn. Abisal Nakama says that's all it is. You should take the opportunity of the Midas Chasidus. Was the person when we asked the Rebbe, what if the person doesn't ask Mechila? So there already was his topicus in this, because there it already starts getting more complicated. Because just as we saw the Talmid Chacham, we have a Rekanati, which is B'dama, the busy of a Talmid Chacham, and the case, both of these cases, certainly in the case of Rabbi Kupperman, the second person was also a Talmid Chacham, not on the same madrega maybe. In both cases, you had a Shemra on a Talmid Chacham, and Rekanati state, Eilu Mechila Lamas, and they state in Yerushalmi. Is there still a chiyuv? I mean, midas chasidus in Michael? Yeah, was das double nicht Michael sein? Why? Because Nachnami have no chiyuv Mechila. But Mavra Midaisav applies. And therefore, you're being mizak the other person. And if you don't be Michael, you're covered by the Yerushalmi, you're covered by the Ramah. But one thing the Yerushalmi doesn't speak to. By not being Michael, the other person, the Mighty Shemra, is going to get a terrible chait. By him getting a terrible chait, he's not being nichnas. When the Yerushalmi says, Ein mechila lamis, what does that mean, lamis? What is the Yerushalmi trying to add here? I think the pshat lamis is Eilam Abba too. Because if you're not Michael, you don't get a mechila. Let's say Eilam mechila lamis. Eilam mechila lamis means even Eilam Abba. So you, says Rav Shtema, were goyrim that a person should not be nichnas and mechitzah seish leKadosh Baruch Hu. That reverses the chait on you. I is Ramah says it's not mechit Michael. True. But this person is going to be nenished. The Ramah does not tell you, says Rav Shtema, that you are allowed, that you are somehow going to be tainted with a new chait of being goyer of somebody not to become into the mechitzas shekadosh baruch hu. Why that person was pegeya ad nafshecha, as we'll see in a minute, doesn't matter. Now your imachila, you are being goyer that he was going to get a nerash, and then a kadosh baruch hu. Sorry, the Gemara says kalad, somebody who is goyer, and a person should get an einish, ein machlis oisai mechitzas shekadosh baruch hu. slight misquote. Now we have the quote accurately. You will not be nechnas to the mechitza of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Because he is Mighty Shemra. Eloi mechila elamis. He's not coming into Gan Eden. So you are preventing him from coming to Gan Eden. You're preventing him from coming into Gan Eden. Mida keneged mida, says Rav Steinman. This is my avon of what he said. Mida keneged mida. You will goyim. A person should not be nechnas for a bisel and a kamba. Everybody likes the kamba. It's a very, very, very satisfying emotional experience. But it comes at a price, like every other vera, mitzvah. And therefore, process to humble them is in the kamba. However, one of Gedeli Dereinu, Maran Agayim al Pachad Yitzchak, would seem to hold otherwise. Pachad Yitzchak, in Maimer Lamed Chesed, and Hilchos of Kippur, talks about this halacha in Yerushalmi of Eilam Mechila Elos. He says, let me tell you what he says outside, and then we'll learn it inside. He says, Ramon brings this to Yerushalmi. Where does this come from? He says, I'll tell you where it comes from. He says, the Dalet Chaluki Kapara that we have in the Gemara in Yuma has an exception to the Chaluki Kapara, as I mentioned earlier. And that is, there's a chait called Chil Hashem. Chil Hashem, Eilam Mechila Elamis. Okay, as I mentioned, Chil Hashem has no Mechila, has a further literature in the Rishonim and the Achroiner, in the Yaina, in the Nefesh HaChaim, what the possible tikkunim for even a chayt Rachman L'Tzlan of Chil Hashem is. Our tikkunim change your entire persona. But Be'ikar Adin brought the Rambam in Perek Aleph of Hilchos Tshuva, end of the first halacha. The Rambam codifies the Dal Chaluk Kapara, which we'll learn about next week. But Yud, the Rambam says, "Ain't no mechilan mitzvah Shem." Says Rav Flitner. You know what? The halacha, the chumrah of mitzvah Shemra, that there's no mechila ilamis. There's mitzvah Shemra is Chil Hashem. It's not Chil Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not Mechalel Shem Shemayim. It's Mechalel Shem Chaverei. Everything in our world is a parallel. Mahu Afata. If there's a concept of Chil Hashem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of a person of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similarly so, there's a concept of Chil Hashem of a person. You're being Mechalel his name. All a person has in life is his name. Because Hashem Tayyif. If you attack and therefore diminish a person's Keser Shem Tayyif, you've been Mechalal Shemai, and just as there's no Mechila Elamis of Chil Shem Shemayim, there's no Mechila Elamis of Chil Shem Chaverei. Chidush Otzamad Ma'id. This is his pshat in Yerushalmi. Muva Barab Rishonim, Muva Barama. Now we can see it inside. Chiyav Limchal Amayti Shemra, Ayin Shulchan Aruch. Danu Anu Be'ema. Can be Kairo Eshal Inyan Zeh, Rebaisa Dabar Chiluke Kapara. Mukar this halacha is in the Gemara. Shabon Nikva Chil Hashem Eila Kapara Leibe Tshuva. Can't do Tshuva and Chil Hashem. Leibe Yisurin, Rachman L'Tzlan. And Yom Kippur, the entire package, which is Mechaper and Chayva Krisis. The worst Chatayim the person can do. Tshuva and Yisur and Yom Kippur is Mechaper. Not Chil Hashem. What's Mechaper and Chil Hashem? Ela Kapira, Kapara Chiyamas. Mises Gomer says a Kapara. Now listen to the operating sentence. If you can bring your marker down here of Mordechai or Pesach, and right there, it's smack in the middle. Mahalei kol moitzi shemra. Mechal hu shmei shel chaverei. Unbelievable word. When Mekivan Shana Royim b'derachav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, שאין מידס החסד מחייבס את הסליחה, אפילו לאחר שעשה תשובה. Says the Rav Hutner, Dafshan from the Rabbi Shlomo. Rabbi Shlomo is not Machal Adchil Hashem after Tshuva, after Yisur Machmal Tzlan, after garnished, until Misa. So too, says Rav Hutner, Imachetu Chil Shemoyis Barach, comma, Memela. Now we go to the other parallel, other side of the coin. Gami midas hachesed shalonu and oirim shafilu midas hachesed shalonu. Eina mechayev l'sloyach l'mish shachata negdenu aydei etzois shemra. Shekain kol etzois shemra ba hechrach chilul shemoi kaveinoi shalayim. Unbelievable words. What? So where is this Pachad Yitzchak based on? I mean, he goes on a little bit longer. I don't want to take the whole thing out. Just tell you what he says outside. He says, we find the Rislichem and L'chil Hashem after Misa. That's all we did in Shemai. We're there that down the Slicha, which comes through the Einshem, including the Einish, ultimate Einish of Misa. But Bnei Adam, us down here, we cannot put ourselves into the Cheshbonos of Slicha of another person's package. And therefore, the only thing that is ability to effectuate a kapara and such an avera is the piyus. And if there's no requirement to do that, because your shmoi was mechul. He then brings a miri, which I didn't copy here because I ran out of room. So I'll tell you what he says outside. The list of miri, the Gemara says that certain averas ain't must speak in the other last is tshuva. Miri says you're not mechuyev to help the chaytim do tshuva. Right? Somebody's machtis a rabbin. You're not mechuyev to go back to him to help him do tshuva. Because we're not mechuyev to be, as I said earlier, from the Rabbi Shlomo. His lesson is, and if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not mas speaking b'yad l'asas tshuva, dafei chaychnish. And therefore, I don't have to be meichel. Yishma chacham v'yosef lechach, an unbelievable chiddush of Yitzchak. I heard from Rav Shechter, Zol Gesundheit, that he learned this Pachad Yitzchak with Talmidim, and he showed him a car for this Pachad Yitzchak from a Maral. The Maral in the Sivus Eilam says a Baal Shem Ra is the hepech of a Baal Shem Tov. Talking about Kesher Shem Tov. And he says, just as a Baal Shem Tov, everybody knows about his great milas. Listen to the lesson of the Maral. A Baal Shem Ra, Mechal Atzmai Kvoidoi. Zeh apchitzas agad lafilu b'sheker. Even if it's sheker. Somebody who's mighty shemra, you know by definition mighty shemra is a sheker. But nevertheless, your shmoi was mechalal. And the Maral says, Kfar Marniki Gadol Inyan Hashem. Says Rav Aaron Shechter, for this Maral we see, somebody who's ma'abed is shmoi ha'toiv, even if it's taitza'ah, sheker gomor, that ipso facto all like say shemras are, is atzmai kavoida is mecholo, said the lesson of the Maral. This he says is a possible source. The Rebbe's part in the Balpak. Now we have a concept of the understanding of the Chaimer, the concept of Chalesh. So last year, when we discussed this, Kippur, I said, I was after Kemet Fashtein, the Sugya Mumma in the Torah on the Shvatim and Yeshiva Tzedek. Give me 1 second, please, here. There's a construction going outside and I'm very noisy. I want to close the window. So, Rabbi Sa, we all know that the Shvatim were chayte. Says Rabbeinu Bachya in a very well-known piece. Does the Tzar Shemra exclude regular Lashon Hara? Yes. Regular Lashon Hara is a absolute chiv mechila on the same page. Absolute chiv mechila, that's higher up on the same page. Absolute chiv mechila, the only exception is to Tzar Shemra. That's why we've been struggling here to figure out why Tzar Shemra is different. Let's learn the Bachya. This is the pasuk the Gemara uses. Ona sana pesha checha v'tasu ki rabba gemalucha v'ata sala lepesha avdel akiravicha v'yesh chesim b'davar meilov. So Yosef cried. Why did Yosef cry? So there are several nitunim that we have to understand this pasuk. Let's set the background here. While Yosef was alive, 17 years, there was at least on the surface achva and shalom between the Shvatim, and they all came together in Yaakov's house. Every single Shabbos, invitations would come on the embroidered stationery of the royal palace to all the Shvatim. They all came to eat Zam and Tatan under the auspices of the Grand Vizier of Egypt. All of a sudden, Yaakov Avinu is niftar and his mikvar and Eretz Yisrael. We all come back. First Shabbos after the Shiva, no invitation. Shvatim get very nervous about this. And they send a shaliach, various questions in the Midrash who the shaliach is, a third party, and they say, Kaisram liyat Yosef, Ana sana pesha achecha. I'll take the chats afterwards. We're going to run a few minutes over time, everybody say. So they asked mechila from Yosef through a third party. The Lashain third party. Ba'ata sana pesha avdel kiyavicha, and Chazal learn 3 times Makash mechila, even though it seems to have been said one time. Yosef b'davar elav. The Bnei Bachya says a tremendous chiddush that you all probably heard. Like, we don't find that Yosef was Meichel. They asked him Mechila, and there was no clear, at least on the pasuk, no clear answer. Rabbi Razal, Shekol mi shechat lechaver v'aseh tshuva, ein lo lechash ratz lechaver. Apri shir kasev nachmei sedar b'liba asked the Bnei Bachya, maybe that's the Mechila. Shnir b'zeh Ritz b'Yosef says that it was nice to them. Says the Rebbeinu Bachya, that's not enough. L'reinu sheyasker akasav mechila b'Yosef leishi yodelem sheyisem b'shem chadas. We don't find that he was specifically meichalim. B'imkain. Listen to this stirring language in the Rebbeinu Bachya. We're talking about the shiftei cup. Meisu ba'ansham. L'ay mechilas Yosef. Now the course of history was changed. The terrible einish Klal Yisrael got, the Sarah Ruga Malchus, plus all the concomitant areas that came with the Roman occupation with the auxiliaries that they had, was a result of the bakashas mechila in the proper way. Well, sorry, the granting of mechila by Yosef. Granting of mechila by Yosef led to the kapara, as you all know, as encoded in the Piyutim, the Sarah Gemalchus, Michram B'Kesav Tzadik B'Shvil Nalayim. That's what caused these terrible gzeres. So the Kash is Mavoyer, as I just mentioned, why Taka wasn't Yosef Mechel. So last year, I said this Kitzur, but I'm going to be marked a little bit because I have the Marmakaimus now inside. I'll offer a pshat here, which is I'm talking about an agada, but is built on the halachas that we mentioned earlier. We saw in the Yerushalmi, Muvah ben Mordechai, that one of the yisodos of Akashas Mechila, which seems to be an ikuv, is that one is mechila to be mavakesh Mechila and you have to be mashpil yourself. Okay, so without that, mechila doesn't work. Now, the question that is inherent in Rebbeinu Bachya says that there's the line there, Rakadosh Baruch Hu, Raya Shehishpel Atzmei Merachim Alav, where the hand is, you just want to yell at that, so the element wasn't on the Chodesh, you can see that line. One of the inherent in the Bakashas Mechila is a hashpala on the part of the Pageya. Without that, you don't really get a full ritzui, either because the Nifka sees that, or b'tzad Pageya, that's just not a full, not what the Rebbe Shalom wants you to do, and that's to be, in order to get a Mechila B'leiv Shalom, you have to ask the Mechila B'leiv Shalom. And it requires a Midah Keneged Midah of an Hashpala. So now, let's postulate the answer to the key question I asked. Rebbeinu Bachya tells us that the terrible einish came out of the fact that Yosef was not moichel. Historical einish. So the obvious kasha is why Taka wasn't Yosef moichel. We know that the Shvat's master Mechila, because Chazal tell us that you mechuyev to ask Mechila 3 times, and learn it from this pasuk. Oh no, sono chato, after sono lechatosa. So there was a makashas mechila. Why wasn't there a granting of mechila? So I postulated B'derech Drush, and then I found this in a unbelievable place, and I think it ties together the halachic aspects of this to the Drush chelik b'chad machta. What happened here? The chait of the Shvatim is, we know what they did, but we don't know why they did it. And of them there is Midrash Chazal, and they felt Yosef was a Raidif. But what did they actually do? So in Midrashim, there is a remiss to this. And then I found it in a not so well-known source, Royal Misha. What happened here was the Shvatim were Mitzi Shemra on Yosef. What I'd say Shemra did they do? So the Medrash says that when they came to when they set up the red herring with the Ksainis Pasim and with the dam, they needed dam. So they shechted a so'ir and they spilled that dam on the Ksainis Pasim. They brought it to Yaakov. Yaakov looked at the dam, and Yaakov wasn't unsure because of his tsar and his nevelis, his Ruach HaKodesh was temporarily taken away. And Yaakov wasn't clear what happens here. Shtei Medrash, you'll see in a moment where it's brought. Yaakov looks at the blood of the Ksainis Pasim and doesn't look like human blood. So there's a Gemara Nida which says that the blood of a Bachur Shalei Nasa Isha and the blood of somebody who was Nasa Isha and therefore Bayel has a different color to it. Yaakov looks at the Ksainis Pasim, sees that it's a different color, and he says, Taraf Yosef. Taraf Yosef means he was Nitraf Meilam Ba, because he was Chayte V'haraya, he's no longer a Bachar. He's no longer a Bachar. And his Avain, that was Taraf, was Nitraf Mimenu, the right to be Melijud Beishvat, which was in the original plan, which Yaakov Avinu knew, Ruach HaKodesh. The problem here was that it wasn't true. As we all know, not only was it not true at the time, Yosef was oimid ben Nisayon against Eishes Potiphera. Say Chazal, but what happened here was there was a shgaga sheyotzim pi hashalit. When Yaakov Avinu said that Yosef was chayte, because I see that the dam is not the same color, there was a shgaga yotzim pi hashalit, which is nitfas, even if it's not true. The entire action here was a setup. They were goyrem haitzais shemra an Yosef. What haitzais shemra? What did they possibly say? Where was the aver of Yosef? What was the dibas abra? So I'll say that there was some issues machlekes of an halacha that couldn't have been goyrem to his chiv misa. With a Raidif, Yaakov would not have been makabel that. When they brought this Ksainas of Pasim, Yaakov was makabel. Why? Because they set up a Tzar Shemra, and he was a Chayte. Yaakov Avinu temporarily accepted it and said the phrase that he said. And then, Rabbi Shlomo sent the Eishes Potiphar. He was Oimid ben Nisayon. However, Chazal say that the Shechvazer was Yaitzim and Pi Etz Ba'isa. And because of that chait, was nimna mimenu yud beis shvat. Comes out Rabbi Sai, that we now know what the chait of the shvatim were. The chait of the shvatim was haitzah shemra. They set up a scheme by which, willingly or not, Yaakov assumed the worst about Yosef Tzaddik, and that was the underlying chait for the Dairos. All during the life of Yaakov Avinu, the Shvatim had a chance to rectify this Chaitzah Shemra. And they didn't do it. They didn't do it. So Yaakov never was given an opportunity to change his mind about this punitive chait that Yosef Avinu did. Shvatim never came to Yaakov. Here's the real story. And we shechted the sar, and the dam was different. And really, Yosef was innocent. He was never chayta, never did it. They never asked Mechila b'chai Yaakov Avinu. Why? Because asking Mechila b'chai Yaakov Avinu would require them to go to Yaakov, unveil the entire scheme of the Ksainas Pasim, and for whatever reason, these are the shiftei cut, so we have to be extremely vigilant of how we speak, but this is what Chazal and the Mefarshim say, the tain on them. They never rectified this Haitzai Shemra. Now, yes, Eli, I'm about to get to that. Now, all of a sudden, Yaakov dies, and they start getting nervous because they see Eine Panav and 12 Shilshaim, and they send this third party Mechila. So Yosef says to himself, I have a problem now. What's the problem? I want to be Mechil my brothers. That's who I am, Yosef Tzaddik. The problem is, they didn't ask Mechila when Yaakov Avinu was alive. The Tata was alive. So they never rectified the chait mi'ikarai. What chait was it? Haitzah Shemra. As Eli points out, there's a big chiddush in this pshat, because it was a gram Haitzah Shemra. They didn't tell Yaakov that he was chaytei biznus. They set it up that way, that the inference should come out that way. Nevertheless, gram Haitzah Shemra has the same outcome because they set it up willingly, and Elam Chiyuv loss. So Yosef Atzadik had no chiyuv to be Michael them. Frek the kasha, but what about the marshal? Yosef also, he had a Ramah, but he also had the marshal, and the midas chassidus to be Michael. Why wasn't Yosef Michael with his chassidus? The answer I'm postulating here is, let's hold this off for a second. Why wasn't the answer? And let's show you a Mekayr for this starting chiddush of the chait Yitzay Shemra. I can ask you to go down to the Ragat Shava and the Tzafnas Paneach. I mentioned this to you last year by saying But I didn't have the Rogachev inside, and now I do. Listen to this. Now, this is, believe me, everybody say, this Rogachev alone is worth it. It's not easy because you have to decode every single word in a toughness panach, as you know. So let's try. Sir izim, chayra chalasu. Sir izim, I get a kach. V'vuir needed after test, some debates. The dam bachur shlo yinasi isha ad chaf sumak in Yosef 17. Sumak tfei kedam shayr. The seir is chiver. It's a different color. So Yaakovinu has a problem because he looks at the blood, and if it was loina seisha, it should have been redder, but it was paler. It was white. If you look down on the sources down at the bottom, he brings you the very helpful with the sources. Let's go to Chavdalet, I guess, first. Where's Chavdalet? I cut off Chavdalet. I think I cut Chavdalet off. Okay. So I'm going to go to my text, but not crucial. I can better raise to you. The Gemara says that a dam of makkah is dam shar shachut. A shar has red blood, as we know from the Gemara in Yuma, the Seder Avodah Sumak Tvei. And the other dam, the Leishal Kaladam, El Shal Bachar Shal Nisha Isha. A Kamad Ben Esri. Other state in the Gemara. Okay? Let's move on. We shall say or have an Edom Kalkach. The dam of a Seir is not so red. Chain Huvi Rishalmi, Nida, Perik Beis. The Gemara says the same thing. Dam Seir is redder than dam of a dag. Doesn't matter. Given the raw dam ze diha, this is the Rogachev talking. You saw that it's pale blood. Nafal chashad olav miisha. There was a chashad that there was a avera. Amar taraf taraf. Zerat lami Yaakov Avinu chayara achalasu. Taraf taraf Yosef. Chayara means the yitzra, the avera. And they bring references to the case of the yitzra of Arias is called an ari, chayara, in various gemaras, in Brachos and Sanhedrin. The Zeh Bachamai, Yaakovinu cried very much that his beloved Joseph was nishlam avera. But al yidei zeh, this word came out of Yaakov Avinu, even though it was based on sheker. And that created, in order that Yosef should, in fact, be Ibn Nisayan, Potipharah's wife went after him. The Gemara in Saita. This is the Gemara says, "Aro Yosef have Yud Beit Shvatim El Shiyatzav Shechazar Beit Tzipari Yadav." So okay, Adkan, so far so good. And now, what we at the end, the Rogachev sticks in this incredible thing. Wow, what is this all about? Teretz is the Rogachev learned the way we said that the chait here was Haitzah Shemra, and Yaakov Avinu was Makabalit, and there was a Shagog Yetz Mashal which created a terrible avera. And now Yosef the Tzaddik is faced with a quandary of whether to be Meichel the Shvat. Now I'm adding here a possible teretz to the Kasha of the Rebbeinu Bachya is why Yosef wasn't Meichel. Yosef understood Nu Baruch HaKodesh that the Hilchos Mechila would be learned from this parsha, as Chazal do on Osana 3 times. But they didn't do it the right way. Because what they should have done is, been rectified while Yaakov Avinu was still around to take away the Yitzhak Shemra. Beis, we should have come to him directly without a shliach, because as we learned, and Yitzhak is b'diavad, not chatchila, because it doesn't create the degree of hashpala. 3, they were mechuyev to come to him 3 times, and not bundled together the 3 times in one. We're hoping that Yosef be Michael. So Yosef was in a quandary. He wanted to be Michael, but he couldn't be Michael because he understood that Chazal would base Hilchos, mחילה on this incident, and this incident wasn't a praker b'kashas mחילה for Yitzhak Shemra, even by Midas Chasidus, because he would have been Michael, then it would be a vegshtal l'dairis. You don't have to ask. You can send the shliach. You don't have to ask b'chaye of the person who's makabel the mighty Shemra, because as we saw from the Paiskim, the Ikad Shama v'lei Shama. So Yaakov Avinu heard that Yitzhak Shemra, but he never would have heard the tikkun unless he went over and told him so. And we have no evidence that he did. So Yitzhak Tzaddik was in a quandary. He wanted to be Michael, but he couldn't. Look back at the Rebbeinu Bachya. Maybe this is the pshat in the end of the Rebbeinu Bachya, which is such. Last paragraph, the Rebbeinu Bachya says, what's the double lashon of the pasuk? Pesha achicha v'chatasam, pesha avdo lekei avicha, v'roya kasa leimer v'atasana lepisha. Shvatim were talking in third party, another three on them. Why did they say it straight out? Kiven akasav lirma, he says Rebbeinu Bachya. Imtisa pesha achicha v'chatasam, yeah, pesha avdi lekei avicha nimcha. If you will be Michael, said the Shvatim, and the pesha of avdei lekei avicha nimcha. Ubir akasav ki pesha avdei lekei aviv pesha achiv. Ki yasklam Hashem yizbarach u'meretz u'shlein v'avenzel. What does this mean? The first one is Gash on this Rebbeinu Bachya. I'm not sure what it means, but what is sure is that the pasuk brings up avdei lekei avicha. Why are they bringing up Yaakov Avinu avdei lekei avicha here? So I would like to offer, this is what they were trying to say is, we know that we were chayta to you through Yaakov Avinu. The chayta was not the mechira that we can ask mechila for. But the problem is, we are also avdei lekei avicha. And Yaakov Avinu nishda. So we were asking mechila both from you, and we're asking you to be meichel us the chait that we did against Yaakov Avinu. Ki pesha avdei lekei aviv, pesha achiv. That's us. Not only will we chait to connect the cha, we will chait to connect the Yaakov Avinu, because we were going for him to be makabel. So Shemra, I'll be the ragged shav. And this Yosef says, I can't be Michael. I can't be Michael. In fact, the Yaakov Avinu never heard the Akira of the mighty Shemra. And if I would be Michael, you, it would be a Vekashal Odiris that you can do that, and you can't. Because if you want Michael and mighty Shemra, you can be Michael and Midas Chasidus. But that person, the Pagea, has to do the actions that are necessary to be Iker. Adkar Rabbi Sai went over time. There's many more things to fill in here. Okay, so I'm just a bit metaches some of the chat issues here. Story with Rashash. Rabbi Laser can tell us in a second if he's still on the line. Person Mechal Hashem Shemayim. Okay, correct. Lashon Hara we talked about. What about someone who's mighty Shemra on? I can't see the rest. Can't see the rest, and the rest was, and then we finished with Eli's Chiddush. Okay, Rabbi Sai, we're going to stop here. Kriya Shema is a very, very interesting Havana by Dr. Lerach. We'll have to pick it up another time. I'll see everybody in Mir Tashem on Sunday. I hope I was Nana for this Ragged Shavar. And we will meet with Hilchos Tshuva. The Rav will be speaking on Hilchos Tshuva. Next week we'll be going back to. Okay, thank you. Need to review it given its depth. Mir Hashem, I'll try to review it. Thank everybody for participating.